Pesky pole down the line, and he's going to be out of here. Line down the right field line toward the Pesky pole. Leaping up, and that ball is gone. That's a home run. A lot of our Nesson team as well. High fly down the right field line, headed toward the Pesky pole. That one tucked in, and that ball is going to be against the wall and into second base.
Number retired, and now Rafael Devers trying to retire that baseball inside the Pesky pole.
Welcome to another episode of the Pesky Podcast. I'm your host, the Ritt. With me is the OG George Sutherland. And today we're going to be talking about Mr. Craig Breslow coming back to Boston. And I was thinking, who else knows more about what Craig's been doing for the past couple years? So I reached out to Mr. Crawly's Cubs, and here he is to give us a little insight. So what's going on, man? How you been doing?
Well, I wasn't even going to come on. I was so pissed at you guys for poaching our guy, man. I'm pissed off. That's how I am.
Hey, things happen for a reason. When you were on early this season, we were talking, and you were going through some pitchers, pitching prospects. Were any of these pitching prospects somebody that Breslow was helping, bring in, or?
Well, so you got to kind of go back here. It's not as easy as that. It's when you kind of go back. Obviously, your listeners will know that there are plenty of ties between the Red Sox and the Cubs. I mean, just two historic franchises. But when we got Theo Epstein to be the president of baseball operations, and he brought in Jed Hoyer as the GM and Jason McLeod and all these guys, the Boston connections were obviously, there was a lot of them, right? When those guys kind of came in, they cleaned house. The Cubs were just an absolute mess when they came in. I want to say 2010, 2011, right around there. And the farm system was a joke. The Cubs, they went back-to-back division championships, but were swept in the first round in 2000, 2007, 2008. And then 2009 was just a disaster. They thought it would be a good idea to get Milton Bradley because, he's a nice calming presence in the clubhouse. And so everything was just a disaster. And those guys came in and you saw what they did. They were very similar to the Houston Astros in the concept of tank, get draft picks. And that's what they did to build up the farm system. And so over the years, the Cubs decided that the way they were going to go was to draft hitters, right? And then you were going to pay for pitchers. So they were drafting and acquiring young guys. As far as hitters are concerned, you're taking a look at Chris Bryant, Kyle Schwarber, Javi Baez. If you remember, Addison Russell was a guy that we had. And there were a lot more too. Those were just some of those guys that the Cubs got. Eloy Jimenez, Gleyber Torres, Jeimer Candelario. Those were all guys that the Cubs got going through their system. And so when you went back to those days, we call them the dark days, 2011 to 2014, the Cubs were losing about 100 games a season. It was just awful. And the only thing we had going for us was like, hey, you hear about these guys on the farm system. But of all those guys I just listed, what did you notice about all of them?
Oh, they're all gone now.
What else?
They're not pitchers.
Not a single pitcher in the group. Okay. And so you could sit there and you ask guys about that farm system that was just absolutely tremendous when they came there. There were no pitchers. And so the concept was, we're going to buy pitchers. And that's what they had to do. They brought in John Lester, of course. They brought in John Lackey, another Boston guy. And so they started doing that. And so the plan was, buy your pitching, have your hitters prospects come up, and before you got to pay them, you know what I mean? You know how the arbitration system works and blah, blah, blah. By that time, once those guys need to get paid, the pitching should come up, and then that way you could pay the position players, and now the pitching is going to be cheaper, right? Well, they could not develop pitching of any kind in that run. And so during that time, you're sitting here, and as the Cubs were in the middle of their contention window, they couldn't get anybody to be a reliever. They couldn't get anybody to be a starter. Nobody. Kyle Hendricks, he came from the Rangers, actually, and he was through the system a lot. But other than that, they had nobody, no arms. So every time they needed to get an arm, they had to go back into the system. So again, you take a look at Gleyber Torres. He goes to the Yankees so we can get Aroldis Chapman and get the World Series. Traded, we had to buy Yu Darvish, right? So we had to pay to get Yu Darvish. We paid to get Tyler Chatwood. We had to trade guys for Eloy Jimenez. We traded to get so we could get Jose Quintana. So basically, because we couldn't develop pitching, and Heimer Candelario we got from Detroit, gave to Detroit for Justin Wilson. Because we couldn't develop pitching of any kind, we had to keep paying it. So the payroll's going up, and all these other guys now, Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, Anthony Rizzo's contract went up. All these guys are getting to get paid, and so we're kind of in a bind here where we have no pitching. We've now traded away everybody in the farm system to get pitching, and we, the cupboard was bare at that point, and so at that point, in 2020, they made it to the postseason. And then in 2021, everyone's due to get paid at the end of the season. And that's when the Cubs are going to trade everybody. They start out trading Yu Darvish first. And then they started, then at the deadline, they traded, the first guy was Jock Peterson. And then all of a sudden in one weekend, it was Anthony Rizzo, then Javi Baez, then Chris Bryant. So imagine that punch in the gut. But in 2019, the Cubs bring back Craig Breslow. Okay. And you guys are familiar with Breslow from his time in Boston. And he is one of those guys, when you talk about him, is that he is extremely, extremely intelligent. One of those Ivy League guys, and they're all over baseball now. Double major, molecular physics and biochemistry, because, why not? Nice, easy majors, right?
Trump's what I got.
Yeah, I don't know too many people that are going to top that, right? So you got those two guys, those two majors, but he played Major League Baseball, right? And he played for a lot of different teams. So when you talk about a Theo Epstein, right? Another Ivy League guy, he never played the game. He never got DFA'd. He never got traded. He never had to deal with all of those things, but Craig Breslow did. So he brought not only the intelligence, but the experience of understanding what the players went through. And so when you talk about bringing in Craig Breslow, the Cubs realized that the big problem that they had last time they tried to go on a run was the lack of pitching. The pitching infrastructure was garbage. And so it was up to Breslow to build that pitching infrastructure and really kind of say, okay, where are we having at least a little bit of success and where are we lacking? And there were plenty of places that they were lacking, but he's a guy that uses data, technology, Rapsodo, all of those things. He was really kind of early on, right? Really early on into those things and trying to develop these guys in the organization. So it's not just the Cubs. I think this time around, they're really focusing not only on scouting, but also on development, throw in technology in there. And Craig Breslow is part of a group. We have Justin Stone on the hitting side. Craig Breslow was on the pitching side. Dan Kantrovitz, who the Mets are now looking at poaching, was our scouting guy. And so the Cubs built up a farm system that when you compare the two farm system, probably doesn't have the blue chip prospects that the original farm system did from before. But what it lacks in blue chip prospects, it has a ton of depth. And so that's the thing, you guys know, is that you have to keep churning these guys out. Unfortunately, there is, as much as fans don't like to talk about it, there's a salary cap, you know what I mean? And when you talk, not, a salary cap, but when you talk about the luxury tax and all the penalties that come along with it, it's not just, you're paying money. You lose international free agent signing money. You lose draft picks. You lose all sorts of stuff. You have to keep churning that out in your system. And that's Craig Breslow, not only, and Dan Kantrovitz and all the guys, they made sure that we had depth in a lot of different places. So that's what Craig Breslow did, is not only, making sure that they were drafting, working with the guys in the drafting department, working with the guys in the scouting department, and then the player development. It has to continue. Just because you draft them, you have to take them to the next level. And again, if you're a good team, or if you're making the playoffs, or you're close to the playoffs, Cubs missed it the final weekend of the season, you're not going to get the number 1 draft pick. And even then, there's no guarantee that those are going to work out. We've seen, Mark Appel was the number 1 draft pick when we got Chris Bryant. They're not always going to work out, but you have to get guys that you can bring up to the next level, that maybe weren't blue chip prospects, that can't miss guys, but guys that can contribute to the major league roster, especially like, in the bullpen. Well, maybe you're not going to get a ton of starters. That's a lot hard, but you got to be able to develop guys and go in the bullpen. And the Cubs for years have not had anyone with velocity. And you guys can see how velocity plays in the postseason. You got to miss bats. Too many things can happen. There's just too much variance if you're pitching to contact.
Exactly. A couple points that you brought up that I want to sit there and touch on. One, how you said about everybody in the organization's got to work together. Yeah. From, the scouts all the way up to, the general manager. You guys got to work together on every level. And I don't think with the Boston Red Sox, and George can chime in, I don't think that we worked together since Heimblum got here very well at all. Because there were in between, in the middle, the player development and the actual managers on the field. I don't think they really worked well with Heimblum and the scouts, or anything in between. George, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, that was fairly obvious. I mean, there was, Bloom probably had an affinity to his, data people in the back room. Okay, that's kind of like his thing. But you could see, even with his relationship with Cora, it was broken. And that's not to say that he wasn't a good person. He was, by all accounts. He was very generous with his time and very engaging to talk to. But in terms of building the interpersonal relationships that you need in any organization, as the head guy, you've got to make sure everybody's on the same page. If you're a manager, you don't have to love each other, but you certainly have to get everybody moving in the right direction. That's, I think, one of the things that was missing, for Heimblum. And it's going to be exceptionally important. And I think this is where Breslow brings his experience, not only in the, in terms of, his intellect, but, he understands what baseball players, think and do. He's been in the game a long time. He has, and he certainly has the capability and, intellect to put everybody on the same page and manage in that direction. And that's going to be important, because there used to be a joke, living in New England, that, with the Patriots, was the Patriots way. Well, there needs to be a Red Sox way, a way of doing things. How we approach the game, who do we look for in pitching, who do we look for in hitting, and it starts, and then that developmental process begins in the minor leagues.
Right. So, and when Theo came here, that was that's what they called it. The Cubs way is the way that they called it. And right now, I just pulled up the Cubs' top 10 pitching prospects. 6 are position players, 4 are pitching. So that just kind of shows you the balance that you need.
Exactly. I'm going to sit here and pull up Red Sox top 10 prospects. And I think we got one pitcher.
Right. And not only that, but when you go through the top 30 prospects, there's a ton of arms in there. And some of them have already this is going to be the interesting thing about the 2024 Cubs, is how many of these guys break through. A couple guys got a little taste. Pete Crow Armstrong came up in September, mid-September. He got a little taste. Ben Brown was injured, but he's a pitching prospect. You had Jordan Wicks started some games in September for the Cubs, but there's a ton of guys. Like we're actually, and that's why the Cubs, a lot of people are talking. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to this, but our names being kicked around in the Juan Soto trade, because we have a lot of guys that are at that we just won the AA championship. The Tennessee Smokies did.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of guys in AAA. We just got a lot of guys that have really nowhere to go, so to speak. So, I mean, we're going to be, that's what you use prospects for, is to fill in areas of need and to trade to get other things that you need. And so, there's just a ton of great, prospects when you start looking at some of these arms. And like I said, the thing that I notice more than anything is these are guys that miss bats, velocity, and just, they got these guys from all over the place, whether it's the draft, whether it's the international free agent market, all sorts of things. So I'm just excited, and I just hope that the Cubs can somehow replace Craig, because it's just, those are big shoes to fill. I think that for somebody like me that really enjoys watching the farm systems, and I go to a lot of the different minor league parks, it's been a joy to kind of watch these kids all grow and develop. And now they're, like I said, they're all on the bubble, and who's going to go where, who we're going to keep and who we're not going to keep,
Yeah. And I want to correct myself. We have two pitchers in the top 10. Wilkerman Gonzalez and Luis Perales, and they're 9 and 10. So
where's Mata now?
Mata's, I have no idea. He's one that's been injured, so
yeah, they try to come down a little bit.
But no, and another thing I wanted to touch on is, just like you said, Crawly, but the Cubs and the Red Sox are kind of the same team pre-Breslow. We have so many bats, that Chaim Bloom was able to sit there and draft and trade for and bring in, but we lack the pitching depth. I kind of personally wished that Chaim Bloom was never given that position, because I think a 1-2 combination of Chaim Bloom and Breslow doing the scouting, draft together, that's how we would get a complete team. Chaim Bloom would get the bats, Breslow's looking at the pitching, and then Breslow went and helped bring in a lot of people to help develop the people in the minor leagues. Am I right?
Yeah. And I think it was what you guys were talking about earlier is, and especially George, I know you mentioned, is that there just has to be communication top down. Okay. What are we expecting? What are we looking for? What do we want? And then again, what the Cubs have done lately is there's a lot of players that they've had that they've kind of, that were kind of struggling in the system and have improved. A big name that your listeners may recognize is Justin Steele. He was in the Cy Young race all the way until September. He pitched way more innings than he's ever pitched before. Kind of ran out of gas at the end of September. But he had a phenomenal year. Adbert Alzolay was another guy that has been in our system for years, and they developed a slider that all of a sudden became one of his best pitches, and he became the closer, after a couple of months, and he was lights out. He helped the Cubs, once he solidified the closer's role, that's when they went on the run in June, July, August to get them. They were 1.5 games behind Milwaukee in September, and it was the Diamondbacks that took the Cubs spot, the final spot, going into the last weekend of the season. So you see what could possibly happen. But, it's not just drafting, but it's also like, are there guys that are just not being used? Are there ways to give guys new pitches? Is there something mechanically that you can fix on a guy? There's so much that goes into the development of these players. And again, I hate to harp on it, but it's not just the scouting. You could scout them all right and make the right pick. If you don't develop them properly, it's a wasted pick. That's what happens. And so, and again, if you can find a guy and say, hey, we see it all the time. Sometimes you have like catchers or first basemen that just aren't working out. And then you're like, well, hey, can you throw a ball? And all of a sudden, next thing you know, you got a converted pitcher, and that completely changes everything. So you have to be able to, it's such a cliche, but think outside of the box. Communication has got to go top down. There's just a lot that you can do in the minors. And I feel that, like I said, with all the things that we had, it's just absolutely, it was really clicking. And, It's what scared me, because I saw it happen with the Cubs the first time around, is that when you have such a great amount of talent in your system in the front office, other teams are looking at that and they're going to start picking them off. And that's the thing that drives you nuts, is no different than the players. The front office needs depth. So we haven't heard anything, obviously there's a lot of, radio silence during the World Series. The Craig Breslow thing, I think, came before Game 1. So, that's just one of those things. We don't know who it's going to be. We don't know if it's going to be someone outside the system. We do have Carter Hawkins is technically our GM. So Jed Hoyer is the president of baseball ops, and Carter Hawkins is a guy that came from Cleveland, where you guys know that Cleveland always does a great job of developing pitching as well. So I don't know if he's got somebody on the outside of the organization, if we're going to fill it internally. But I think if Red Sox fans, you never know how somebody's going to be in the big seat. You know what I mean? It's one thing to be under somebody, because when everything that happens now is when Theo was here, it was Theo's fault. When Jed's here, it's Jed's fault. Well, when you're in the top seat, the buck stops there. So it's real different being number 2 than being number 1. So we'll see how Craig Breslow deals with it. But, just knowing him and his intellect, and not only that, his ability to adapt, I think will be something that'll help him out, but we'll see.
Yeah. One thing that, before Breslow got here, Bush was fired, which is our pitching coach, and our AAA pitching coach was let go. So that showed me, and I think it showed George also, how John Henry was actually, he knows the problems. He's going to try to get rid of the problem, and he's going to try to fix the problem. And do you have any ideas, what type of people Breslow looks for pitching coaches?
I mean, he's obviously going to look for somebody that that's smart, that's willing to be open to new ideas. I'm sure he has a list of names that, people that he wants to bring over. It wouldn't surprise me. But again, all of these guys, being a former major league player and being in the Cubs system, you're just going to meet people, right? And so he's going to want somebody that, looks at both things, looks at the human beings and the analytics. And that's going to be the most successful organizations, are the organizations that combine the two. It just cannot be analytics, and it just cannot be, well, my gut says this. It has to be a combination of those two things. And I think that's what Craig Breslow is going to look for in somebody. But he is somebody that does use the latest, all the pitching technology. So, I mean, obviously, that's going to be important to him as well, is you got to be open-minded to trying some of these things. And that's what I think he would probably look into. But it wouldn't surprise me even if he has some old Red Sox pitching teammates that he would like to, bring in and go that route, because, think about it. When I think about like the pitchers and stuff like that, it's interesting to hear how they have conversations with each other. When we had when we had Craig Kimbrell, former Red Sox, right? Yeah. When we had Craig Kimbrell, he taught Yu Darvish how to throw a knuckle curve, just shooting the breeze, in the dugout. You asked him, how do you throw that? And Craig Kimbrell and you went out in a game, literally in a game, before he ever even practiced it, and threw it in a game and got a strike. It's those type of things, those conversations that you have. And so, I've read a lot of articles about Craig Breslow as well. And that's the thing, his teammates right away were like, oh, that guy's really smart. He's got a future in the front office. Like, guys kind of know, the players know. Same thing they used to say about David Ross. That guy's one day going to be a manager. Everybody said it, and here he is as the manager of the Cubs. So I'm sure that during those conversations, all the years going through all these systems, he's met people that he put in the back of his head. That guy's special. That guy's got something. And now that he's been making the calls here pretty much for the pitching stuff here, and I'm sure he'll do the same thing over in Boston.
Yeah, Crawly, it was kind of funny seeing Twitter, go up. Where a couple names, like you mentioned, former Red Sox pitchers, were like, oh, well, maybe he was going to be a pitching guy. So we got John Lester was brought up on Twitter, which I would sit there and love to bring him home because he should have never left in the first place.
Huge mistake, but thank you.
I've seen on Twitter a man that probably has free drinks for life in Boston, Keith Folk. He was actually in our minor league system a while back, showing the kids, and and working with them. So it's going to be quite interesting, who we're going to bring in, but it's going to be an exciting off season, and I can't wait to see Breslow get to work.
Well, let's just put it one way, though. I think your listeners need to be understanding that just because they were in Boston doesn't mean that they have to be from Boston. You can find Cub fans go into the same mentality of like, when we have a managerial opening, let's get Joe Girardi. Well, no, you don't have to do that. You can, smart organizations sometimes look outside to kind of get things. And so, I'm sure Craig has guys that might be within the Boston system, maybe out of the Boston system, but even if they don't come from there, that's okay too. As far as John Lester, the answer is no. So for all your Boston listeners out there, trust me, we all thought the same thing here in Chicago. John Lester is very content and happy living his best life, but I'm going to give you a little Lester story right here. John Lester is obviously a very famous left-handed pitcher. And so was our Cy Young candidate, Justin Steele. And so Justin Steele was battling in 2022 for the 5th starter spot, along with a couple other guys in 2022. And so all of a sudden he's pitching, he's starting for the Cubs. And, David Ross is sitting there, and who gives him a phone call? John Lester. Lester and Justin Steele, both Southern boys, both lefties, big hard throwing, both lefties, he gave some advice to Ross to pass on to Steele. I don't know what it is, but whatever happened, the second half of Justin Steele's 2022, after he got that info, completely changed him into Justin Steele in the second half of 2022 was one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. Okay, nobody knew because the Cubs were just awful, and you know what I mean. But he brought it in 2023, just as good, and kept it rolling. So, would I love John Lester to be a pitching coach? Absolutely, but I also think 100% he's a guy drinking a beer, watching the game, spending time with his family, and just enjoying it without all the pressure. Just enjoying life, man. It would be wonderful to have Lester back in the game, of course. I just don't see it happening. But again, having those type of contacts where Lester can just on his cell phone dial up Rossi, Rossi, hey, tell the kid to do this. Okay, boom. So I don't think it's going to happen, but it is. These are guys that are very intelligent and they see things that we might miss.
The thing to remember too is, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, George.
Thing to remember too. I mean, he pitched in the better part of 12 years in the majors, so. He didn't just play for the Red Sox. He was with the Athletics for a while, the Twins, the Indians, I think the Marlins and the D-backs too. So, when you go around the majors like that and, get to a whole bunch of different clubs, you meet a lot of guys, you play with a lot of guys, you become friendly with a lot of guys. Okay. Yeah. And your pitching philosophy and things like change. And it's the old story, take the best and leave the rest. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that's been the hallmark of him since moving to the front office. So, there may be some dark horse candidates that, we're not even thinking of. And, he pitched with him in Oakland and he says, yeah, this is a guy I know we have a similar mindset and, approach. And I know that he believes in the same things I believe in. So, I think there'll be some dark horse candidate that'll come up and we may not even know who it is. It'd be nice to have Lester back in Boston, again, considering everything he went through as a younger player. And I'm with Ritt. He should never have left, but, consider.
Yeah, but if he doesn't leave, I don't get to brag about being World Series champions, man. I had to wait. My family had to wait 108 years without John Lester. That doesn't happen.
Well, the Red Sox fans are known for being generous, Crawly. So that.
I like I said, man, when they signed John Lester for Cub fans, that was like this could happen. And it's funny because Theo and Jed actually, when they made their pitch to Lester, said, showed him. Obviously, you guys broke your own curse in 2004, but Lester wasn't on that team. And so one of the pitches was they had when they had some sort of video or something of John Lester on the mound of Game 7 with the Cubs winning the World Series. Now, obviously, he didn't close it out, but he pitched 3 innings in Game 7 of the World Series, and he's another guy that will never pay for drinks ever in Chicago. He was beloved, and and John Lackey as well. And so those guys are just, they came over here and they had success, and it was a lot of fun. But, you got a good one in Craig Breslow. I think if what you're doing is trying to rebuild pitching, he's exactly the guy you want to have. And now this is going backwards. Our loss is your gain.
Yeah. George, and any more comments at all?
Oh, no, I thoroughly agree with what Crawly said. What goes around comes around. We, since the Theo Epstein era, that we developed an awful lot of good front office folks. They've gone to other organizations. We're a little bit thin in that department now. So now our job is to go pick off, some quality people out of other people's front offices and start the whole process again. If you don't do that, you die as an organization. And, I'm excited that Breslow's coming on board simply because of the way, he's made the transition and just being as smart as he is. So,
and your fans, again, I don't have to tell them this, but there's a little bit of patience involved. It's going to take some time. This is not going to be a snap of the finger, and you're going to have the top 5 farm system. If you're in bad shape, it takes a little bit of time, and it may be painful. Again, for Cub fans, think about this: in a stretch of a little over 24 hours, we lost 3 of the most beloved Cubs of this generation in Rizzo, Baez, and Bryant. That was the price of playing poker if you want to restock the system. And I don't know if Boston's going to do that. I don't know that like you guys do in depth. But we had to once again, and again, as a big market team, you hate this idea of losing and trading guys and just giving guys up. But that's what we've done the last few years. And some of those prospects that I told you about in our farm system, we got in trades. We got Ben Brown in a trade, I want to say, with the Phillies for Dave Robertson. He's our number 5 prospect. Number 2, Cade Horton. They got him in the draft from Oklahoma. When you talk about Jackson Ferris, got him in the draft. Jordan Wicks got him in the draft. But we also got other guys that are in our top 30 prospects. Caleb Killian, we got in the Chris Bryant trade. He's number 23, and other guys as well that we just got from trades. And that's just not a fun part of it. You don't like to lose, like I said, beloved players. But like I said, if you want to rebuild and restock the farm system, the teams that get the best picks are the ones that have the worst records. So that's kind of where you go,
Yeah. Well, you were on for the trade deadline show, and we were sitting there talking about Ohtani. And I still think to this day, the Angels made the biggest mistake not trading Ohtani for the amount of rebuilding of the farm system they could have done for Ohtani. You guys went and gave up 3 of your most beloved people, and now you guys are setting yourself up for a successful future there in Chicago.
Every team's different. The Angels farm system, obviously, they were such a mess, and they traded a bunch of guys at the end, which I hope they change that rule, because that was garbage that a bunch of teams got. I feel like if you take someone off the waiver wire, then you need to go back at the end of the line. You can't keep cutting in front of the line and taking guys. Like the Angels just kind of made a mess of that. So I hope they fix that. But the Cubs did the same thing though this year. They took a risk and they decided to go for it rather than trading Cody Bellinger, who was on a 1-year deal. And we had Marcus Stroman was pitching really well at the time and had an awful second half after, post All-Star. I think he did good against Boston, was the only game that he actually pitched good in for the whole rest of the second half. Mm-hmm. And so, they made a call, but our farm system, again, like you said, better shape than the Angels. But sometimes the thinking goes, it's where you are as a team. If your farm system's depleted, then it would have been smarter to trade them. If your farm system's healthy, the Cubs thinking in this one was, let Bellinger have a whole year in Chicago, and that might give us the upper hand in re-signing him if he enjoys it. He likes playing here, those type of things. So that was the thinking with the Cubs mentality on the trade deadline. But like I said, we also got a lot of guys that hopefully will come up. And if not, like I said, if we got to trade some guys to try to get Juan Soto, we have the farm system to do that, where we're not gonna raid the cupboard bare. You know what I mean? That's not going to happen. We may have to lose 2 or 3 guys that we don't want to lose. But what's the famous saying? You'll always take exclamation points over question marks.
Yeah. So, quick question about, you brought up Bellinger. What are the rumblings out there with you guys? Do you have a good shot at re-signing Bellinger?
That's a tough one. So our number one prospect is a guy named Pete Crow Armstrong. The Cubs traded Javi Baez to get Pete Crow Armstrong, and New York's kicking themselves in the butts for that one. Cody, the Cubs do have just an awful history of center fielders. Like, you could sit there and go every position, first, second, short, third, and I can name you a Hall of Famer without, anything. Center field has just been an absolute, we've not had a homegrown center fielder since I'm trying to think of one, maybe Rick Monday, in the 70s,
Rick Monday? Ooh.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We have no center fielders. So even though, obviously he came from the Mets, PCA went through, started in low A for us, and went all the way through the system. So we haven't had like a guy that's the center fielder. We had a couple guys, Kenny Lofton we had for half a year. We had Dexter Fowler, I think, for 2 or 3 years. But we haven't had that stud center fielder. And so having Cody Bellinger, and I have season tickets in the bowl, but every now and then I like to go out in the bleachers and just get a different perspective, see the game from a different angle. And watching Cody Bellinger playing defense was like, oh my God, this is what a center fielder should look like. Not a converted short second baseman, not a somewhat speedy left fielder, like a legit center fielder. And watching Cody Bellinger just make those plays was just absolutely phenomenal. It's going to be expensive to bring him back. Now, for the Cubs, the weakness that we have is first base. And so Cody Bellinger, he hurt his knee, I want to say in May against Houston. And when he came back, he plays some first base. And he played excellent at first base. And it was when he came back and played first, and then we had a journeyman named Mike Talkman play center, and he kind of had a little bit of a run that was good, but then he kind of came back to earth. But when Talkman was playing center and Bellinger was playing first, that's how we made the run. So the question would be, we got guys in left and right. We got Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki in left and right. Seiya has, I think, another 3 years on his contract, and I want to say Ian has another 2. Both guys have no trade clauses. So that's something to keep in mind. So, I mean, in an ideal world, left field, you'd have Cody Bellinger and center PCA. That would be my ideal world. PCA, when you guys see him, this kid just makes unbelievable catches, one of the fastest guys in baseball. I am praying to the baseball gods he becomes our version of Corbin Carroll, because when he gets on base, he just makes things happen. It's stolen base, first to third, maybe home, that type of stuff. So I don't know. Again, I don't think, though, that Cody Bellinger, obviously with the season he had, he's going to be able to dictate what he wants to do. So I see him wanting to play center field. And so I think that for the Cubs, the question would be, okay, if we don't sign Cody Bellinger, we have to replace his bat. We'll be okay replacing his defense with PCA. It's the bat. If we don't have his numbers, he saved us this year. And so would it be a Pete Alonso? Could we make a trade with New York for Pete Alonso? Is it someone at third? Maybe, Heimer Candelario, we got him in a trade after the trade deadline. Is he a guy that's going to want to stay? But even him, like, is he going to, we had a lot of guys. We had 6 guys with 20 or more home runs, but we didn't have any of those big thumping 35, 40 home run guys that can just, there was no guy in the lineup that really scared you, that you were like, oh God, here comes this guy with guys on base, other than Bellinger. So if you don't have him, who are you going to have? That's what has to get replaced. And so it'd be great. I just don't see Cody wanting to play an everyday first base spot. Now, can we do some things where we kind of DH, and kind of shuffle and give some guys rest? Maybe. So I just don't know how it's all going to play out.
Well, I'm curious about where would Juan Soto fit in then? You got 2, like you said, 2 non-trade clauses. You got that young prospect, and I remember you talking about him when you were on our podcast earlier.
Yeah. It's just, again, that's where the DH comes in, and just trying to kind of give guys days off and rest and all that stuff. That would kind of be kind of how I would look at it. So. The Cubs DH system, DH has always been a problem since the DH came in here, obviously, or a National League team. The DH was something new. So a lot of times, like we'd use like backup catchers as your DH. It's like,
Yeah, no.
can we get a guy that can with a little thump if we're gonna have a DH? Like I think the Cubs kind of use the DH sometimes as like give a guy a rest day so he's not on the field but his bat's still in the lineup. But I would rather have just like a big thumper in as DH. That would be to me fun. I think that's the purpose of the DH rather than just giving guys rests or days off their feet. So we'll see what happens. I'm curious. Obviously, this offseason for the Cubs is a big one. They have Jason Hayward's contract coming off the books, $23 million. Our owners talked about wanting to stay close to the salary cap. So my guess, I think the salary cap is or the luxury tax. I keep saying salary cap. Luxury tax is about what, $237 million?
Or 235, somewhere in there.
Right. I thought
maybe 237, but yeah.
I think it goes up next year
to 2024. 2024 is 237.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you got for us? But either way, I think that the Cubs are going to be close. I would put them at the 220 to 230 range. So, I mean, if Bellinger doesn't come back and obviously, like I said, the Hayward contract is off the books. There's questions about Marcus Stroman. I don't think he'll opt out. He hasn't opted out, but he looked like he was going to opt out with the first half he was having as an all-star, and then absolutely was awful in the second half, injured and couldn't play. So, I would say, he'll probably still be here, but you're still talking with Hayward and with Bellinger coming off the books. You got 35 to 40 to play with. So we'll see what happens. But if the Cubs want to take that next step, they can't go cheap. Okay. They got to go big. They got to swing at something. And like I said, whether that's Bellinger coming back or whether that's getting someone to replace Bellinger, they have to make moves to make that next step. Mm-hmm. Watching this postseason, you can just see how the Cubs are close, but not in that league.
Yeah. One name you mentioned is another team that I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in the off season is the Mets with Pete Alonso.
Yeah. Because
Pete Alonso, I sit there, I remember him saying, I ain't chasing nothing anymore. Like he wants out, and I remember seeing a pop-up in foul territory, and I see the second baseman running over. Alonso could have easily took 3, 4, 5 steps over there to go get it. Second baseman ran over, caught it, and then looked over Alonso. Alonso just shook his head at him, So, and the Mets are saying they want Shohei, they want Yamamoto. You can't even keep the people happy that you have.
With them, they got the deep pocketbooks. Big Daddy Steve Cohen doesn't care what he spends. So I think for a guy like Alonso, he's a guy who's seen a lot of disaster with the Mets. If you're a new guy coming in, I think that might, the money will be attractive. And I think, we'll see what happens, but Pete Alonso absolutely kills the Cubs. So he's one of those guys that, if he's on your team and even if he's doing bad, at least he's not killing you. Last time we faced him in New York, he hit 4 home runs in 3 games. And we're just, as Cub fans, going nuts. Like, he's the one guy that can hurt you. Don't throw him a pitch. Just put up the 4 sign and let him take first base. He literally killed us. So it would be interesting to see what he would do at Wrigley Field. And like I said, the Cubs could really benefit. Like, I just want a guy that can bop, man. I want a guy that can hit. I want tape measure home runs is what I want. So we'll see if he can do that at Wrigley.
I'd say he can sit there and easily take care of your problem at first. And, Chapman's a free agent. He could take care of over third base for you, too.
Yeah, I know Chapman had that bad second half, and so kind of they've been looking at that. We got a guy in Christopher Morel, and he's an interesting player. He's a kid, and, he's got a little bit of Javi Baez in him, a lot of flair. And when he hits the ball, boy, does that ball just pop off the bat. It's like a super ball going out. It's like he's playing with an aluminum bat, and he has the flair for the dramatic. He smiles. He's one of the greatest kids you'll ever meet. One of the sweetest, nicest kids. But they've kind of like used him in every position other than pitcher and catcher. Like, he's been like everywhere, and he hasn't settled on a spot. And so, he's going to be playing some Dominican League baseball in the Leadham League. And so the hope is that he's going to be there for a month. I think they want to see how he does at third. So I think that's a question too. And the only thing about him too, though, is like Javi Baez, is that sometimes when he takes the ball the other way to right and doesn't have to hit the home run, he'll do good. But sometimes when he gets too pull happy, you could throw a slider and the guy would be swinging. You're going, what in the hell are you swinging at? But again, boy, he didn't even start the season with the Cubs. He started last year. He came up last year in 2022, played a whole bunch. And then they wanted to work on some things hitting wise, came up in about May of 2023, and then led the team in home runs. So, that just kind of shows the power. It's just, can you get him to be a little bit more disciplined at the plate? And again, yeah, if all of a sudden you see a spinning slider right in the middle of the plate, then go ahead and pull that one and put it on Waveland. But, if a guy's, pitching you outside, sometimes you got to be able to go the other way and just take the single or maybe even a double out of it.
Yeah. George?
Yeah, I mean, your problems in Chicago are not unlike our problems in Boston. We need pitching, okay? We need a powerful right-handed bat. But, in our case, we need 2, probably 3 front-end starters. And, that's an expensive thing to try to pull off. Whether it be free agency or trades or whatever. So the capital is going to come from someplace.
Right.
And right now, at least, I'm sure Cubs fans were happy enough that they came close, but didn't make it. Right now, Boston fans have had enough, enough last place finishes. And, I think every club's offseason is, meant to get better. I think there's a real sense of urgency here in Boston. I think that, and Ritt will agree, the fans they're restless. Okay. And they're ready to kill something. They're at that stage right now. So I'm not sure the patience factor is going to be there. We're kind of like, with patience with Bloom, the patience has run out. They might get another season out of that here. But yeah, I mean, you're only as good as your farm system, because your farm system either develops players you bring up or develops players that other teams want so that you can get the assets you can't develop. So, I think that it's that important, and you need to build that for the long run. It sounds like you guys are starting to do that in Chicago. And there's a glimmer of hope for us. And like I said, we have some thumpers on there, but pitching we need to develop more of. So
right. And I would just, like I said, a lot of Cub fans didn't have patience. They're frustrated. You don't want to be a major market team and see your team in last place or 5th place or whatever. The only thing I could tell you is, after the initial shock of an anger of losing all of our favorite players in 2021, I kind of turned my attention and kind of separated myself from the fan to a guy that's okay. Let me see what I can do. Let's kind of let me see what the plan is. And so I don't know if Boston's going to be in first. I mean, you guys obviously are in one of the toughest divisions in baseball. And that's something the Cubs have going for them, is they're in right now one of the weakest. Well, actually, Milwaukee, Cincinnati, and the Cubs actually did pretty good this year. They actually ended up being a better division than we thought. And watch out for Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. They're a team that is stacked as far as young players are concerned. But I would say that, it's, fans are going to be upset if you don't have wins. That's obvious. But for me, the last few years has basically been spent like, well, what are they doing? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, look at that guy. Wait, what about this? Oh, okay. Now I see what they're doing. Now I see it's making some sense. And so there's no guarantees in baseball, gentlemen. You guys know that more than anyone, as much as we do. No guarantees in baseball, but I will say that, if you do your best. And so the guys that the Cubs got in exchange for the guys that we love, when you talk about PCA, one of our best prospects, when you talk about Kevin Alcantara, he's called El Jaguar. He's in the AFL league right now. Just absolutely phenomenal. When you talk about Chris Bryant, and you got Alexander Canario, and, you start looking at some of these guys that you got and you're like, okay. And then not only that, it just helps us a little bit that all the guys that we got rid of ended up not doing successful after they left. So, Rizzo was probably the best. He obviously had the concussion this year, but I think Rizzo was also in the perfect situation where they didn't need him to be their first or second best hitter. Plus he's playing in, New York, where you got that short porch. So it ended up, I think, working out great for Rizzo. He was the one guy I wish they would have kept just for some continuity and for the fans. But, there may be some tough, times ahead if you're really going to do it the way that the Cubs did it. I don't know what Craig Breslow has got up their sleeves, but it may take a little bit of patience. And that's where the pesky pool is going to have to keep fans off the ledge and just let them know, hey, you guys are going to be all right. There's a plan in here. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, George is up there in Maine, getting to see our Sea Dogs, our Double-A team, and we have that thing's going to be stacked. That was stacked. I can't wait to see what where they pan out and where they're going to, go to. Some are going to get to go to Triple-A. Some are going to stay there for, another season. But I enjoyed getting more in depth and bringing on the minor league players, talk to them, get to know them, and see what Chaim Bloom's, vision was in essence. Putting all these pieces together. Some of them might be hard to see get let go, but when you are in a need, George brought up earlier, we need 2, possibly 3 front end starters. We can't afford, all 3 of them through free agency. Two in a trade, I can see, but to get a good frontline starter like a Corbin Burns, you got to sit there and you're going to have to give up somebody, and it hurts. But if you want that World Series, look at the World Series we're in right now. Well, 2 years ago, both teams 100 losses. That's crazy.
The other thing you want to take a look at when you look at those 2 teams is what I keep reminding Cub fans is that the way that we did it, at least in 2016, was identify your young cornerstones and then fill in your needs in free agency. And you see that very much with Texas, with what Texas has done. And then obviously Arizona is a little bit, much smaller market team as compared to say like, Cubs or Boston. They have a lot, they don't have as expensive as a payroll, but those are also young players as well. So to me, getting the young players and then mixing in the veterans, like I said, who are your cornerstones that you're going to build upon? And then who are the guys that are going to take you to the next level? And that's what the Cubs did in 2015, in 2016, when you got Ben Zobrist, when you got Jason Hayward, when you got John Lester, when you got John Lackey, when you traded for Aroldis Chapman, that when you know what you have and you got those cornerstones, spend the money and get those pieces that are going to take you over the top.
Yep.
Exactly. So, George, any final thoughts?
No. This has been great. Get somebody's perspective, who has seen Breslow in action for the last few years, and that's always great. So, thanks, Crawly, as always.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. And like I said, good luck to you this offseason. Don't take any of the guys we want, and we won't take any of the guys you want. And then hopefully, like I said, we'll talk next season, and hopefully you guys have a good year, except when you face the Cubs.
Yeah. So, hey, Crawly, thanks for coming on. Like always, there's nobody else I could have thought of to talk, Breslow other than you. So, thanks for giving us, so much of your time throughout the season. That trade deadline show was fun.
It was fun.
Don was on from covering the Reds. We had the Brewers guy on, and then you guys were all like, mingling. And I love that, that I can't wait till next year. When we do another trade deadline show, I'm hoping to sit there and do an NL and an AL, separate shows. And, we're definitely going to be sitting there and getting a hold of you for the series also.
Sounds good, guys. You take care and have a great season.
Yep. Take care, Ben.
You too, brother.
So, one thing that might be interesting, and I'm just kind of throw this out there, maybe kind of, put together a list of all people that we can all know each other. Like I got some Marlins guys or something. Let's put some sort of something together. My email's just Crawly's. Crawly, I think I can send you my email. I think you have it. But maybe let's put together some sort of list of teams we have of other podcasts that we can all kind of shoot the breeze with.
Sure.
Definitely. I'll sit there and send that over to you right after.
We can maybe make like a spreadsheet or something. You know what I mean? Google Sheets or whatever the hell it's called.
So, okay.
Take care, guys.
Yep.
Thanks, man.
So, guys, man, I love the Breslow talk. I'm kind of excited to hear from him. yeah, we had some tough times. You had to give up people, but look what they got, in the long run, and I can't wait for that. So, guys, like always, if you want to listen to us, check us out on Apple, check us out on Spotify. Head over to the YouTube channel. I'm going to throw out a big contest. I'm going to be giving away one of my prized autographed jerseys for someone.
Uh-huh.
All you got to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we're going to work that out. This Wednesday, we're going to be putting out our new show, separate show. If you're down for stats, statistic, analytics, you're not going to want to miss that show. And like always, head on over to our website and get yourself a shirt. I got me a Mi Casas as Su Casas shirt. George has got, his Pesky Podcast logo shirt. We've got the hoodies out there now. So, guys, thanks for sitting there stopping by, and check us out next time on the Pesky Podcast.